My name is Madison, and I'm 31 years old, living in Seattle, Washington. I never imagined that discovering my own family celebrating in my inherited house would lead to the biggest real estate decision of my life. When I returned early from a business conference in Portland, I found 43 relatives partying in the Victorian mansion my grandmother had left specifically to me. My mother, Catherine, stood in the kitchen directing caterers, while my sister Emma was giving tours of what she called our family heritage home, a reunion in full swing that nobody had bothered to tell me about. Growing up as the middle child between Emma and my younger brother Jake was like living in a constant state of proving myself. Emma was 2 years older, blessed with our mother's social grace and our father's business acumen. She was the golden child who could charm anyone and always landed on her feet. Jake was the baby, the artistic one who got away with everything because he was creative and sensitive. Then there was me, the practical one who worked twice as hard for half the recognition. My grandmother Victoria was different from the rest of the family. She was a retired librarian who valued substance over style, effort over natural talent. While my parents fawned over Emma's latest boyfriend or Jake's newest art project, Grandma Victoria would ask me about my engineering studies, my internships, my plans for the future. She understood what it meant to build something lasting through dedication and hard work. Every summer throughout high school and college, I would spend weeks at Grandma's Victorian house in the historic district of Bellingham. While Emma was busy with her social life and Jake was at art camps, I would help Grandma with home improvement projects, learning about the house's history and the importance of preserving family legacy. She taught me about the original crown, molding, the hand-carved banisters, and the stories behind every room. When I graduated with my engineering degree, I was the only family member who got a job immediately. Emma bounced between marketing positions, always claiming she was looking for the right opportunity. Jake was pursuing his passion for photography, which meant he was essentially unemployed but called it freelancing. My parents supported both of them financially while praising my independence, as if being self-sufficient was somehow less admirable than needing help. I moved to Seattle for my career, working for a sustainable architecture firm that specialized in historic preservation. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was professionally dedicated to saving old buildings, while my family seemed determined to treat our actual family heritage as a party venue. I visited Grandma Victoria regularly, often driving the 2 hours from Seattle just to spend a weekend helping her with maintenance projects or simply keeping her company. When Grandma Victoria passed away 18 months ago, her will surprised everyone except me. The Victorian house, worth approximately $2.1 million due to its historic significance and prime location, was left entirely to me. Her note was simple: to Madison, who understands that preservation requires dedication, not just appreciation. The house needs someone who will protect its legacy, not just enjoy its benefits. My parents were shocked, Emma was furious, and Jake seemed confused about why anyone would want the responsibility of maintaining such an old house. They had expected the property to be divided among all the grandchildren, or at least left to my parents to distribute fairly. But Grandma Victoria had been very specific in her intentions, and her lawyer confirmed that the will was ironclad and had been updated just 6 months before her death. I moved into the house immediately, commuting to Seattle 3 days a week, and working remotely the rest of the time. I loved every aspect of caring for the property, from maintaining the original hardwood floors to tending the heritage rose garden that Grandma had cultivated for decades. I installed modern utilities while preserving the historic character, exactly as she would have wanted. The family tension was immediate and persistent. Emma constantly made comments about how the house was too big for one person, how it should be shared among the family, how Grandma must have been confused in her final months. My parents suggested I could rent out rooms to relatives, or at least host more family gatherings to make everyone feel included. Jake was less direct but would mention how much he missed having access to the house for his photography projects. I tried to maintain family relationships while establishing boundaries. I invited them for holiday dinners, which they attended, but spent most of the time critiquing my decorating choices or suggesting improvements that would make the house more suitable for entertaining. I offered to host Jake's art shows in the spacious living room, but he declined, saying the house felt too formal now that it wasn't really the family home anymore. The breaking point came when I discovered they had been planning a family reunion for months without including me. I found out accidentally when my cousin Rebecca called to ask if I needed help with preparations for the reunion at Grandma's house. When I told her I knew nothing about any reunion, there was an awkward silence before she realized the family had assumed I would automatically offer the house and had planned accordingly. I immediately called my mother, who was dismissive of my concerns. "Oh, Madison, of course you're invited," she said impatiently. "We just assumed you'd want to host since you have all that space now. We didn't think we needed to ask permission to use the family home." The casual entitlement in her voice made my blood boil. It wasn't the family home anymore. It was my home, and the fact that they couldn't acknowledge that basic reality showed how little they respected Grandma's wishes or my ownership. Emma was even more direct when I confronted her. "You're being selfish, Madison," she said during a tense phone call. "Grandma left you the house so you could take care of it for the family, not so you could play gatekeeper and exclude everyone. We've been planning this reunion for months, and now you want to ruin it because we hurt your feelings by not asking permission to use our own family property." I tried explaining that I wasn't trying to exclude anyone, but that I deserved to be consulted about events in my own home. I pointed out that they had made catering arrangements, sent invitations, and even hired a photographer without once asking if I was available or willing to host. Their response was that I was being dramatic and oversensitive, that families shouldn't need formal permission to gather in a family home. The Portland Business Conference was supposed to be a 3-day event, but I finished my presentations early and decided to drive home a day ahead of schedule. I was looking forward to a quiet evening in my garden, maybe reading in Grandma's favorite chair by the window. Instead, I pulled into my driveway to find cars parked on my lawn, music blasting from my house, and strangers smoking cigarettes on my front porch. I sat in my car for several minutes, trying to process what I was seeing. Through the windows, I could see people I barely recognized moving through my living room, holding drinks and laughing loudly. Someone had moved my furniture to accommodate more seating, and there were children running up and down the stairs that I had just had professionally refinished. The heritage roses in the front garden were being trampled by people who had set up lawn chairs among the flower beds. When I finally went inside, the scene was even worse than I had imagined. The house was packed with relatives I hadn't seen in years, plus their friends and neighbors who had apparently been invited to what was being called the Morrison Family Heritage Celebration. A banner hung across the main hallway reading "Celebrating 150 Years of Family Legacy," complete with old family photos that had been taken from my private albums without permission. My mother was in the kitchen wearing an apron that read, "Family," matriarch, directing a catering staff that she had hired to use my kitchen and serve food to guests I hadn't invited. When she saw me, her first reaction wasn't joy or surprise, but annoyance. "Madison, there you are," she said without looking up from the appetizer trays. "You're early. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow. I hope you don't mind that we started without you." Emma appeared from the living room carrying a tray of empty glasses, looking perfectly at home playing hostess in my house. She was wearing a dress I had never seen before with a corsage that read "Reunion Coordinator." When she saw me, she smiled brightly and said, "Surprise! Isn't this wonderful? Everyone's having such a great time. We should have done this years ago." Asked how they had gotten into the house, though I already knew the answer. Emma had kept the spare key I had given her for emergencies, and apparently a family reunion qualified as an emergency in her mind. She showed me around my own home, pointing out how they had rearranged everything to accommodate the crowd, as if I should be grateful for their initiative in redecorating without my permission. The most painful part was seeing how comfortable everyone was in my space, how they moved through the rooms as if they belonged there more than I did. Cousins were going through Grandma's book collection, aunts were rearranging my kitchen cabinets to find serving dishes, and uncles were smoking cigars on the back porch despite my strict no-smoking policy. Children were playing hide-and-seek in bedrooms I kept locked, and someone had set up a bar in Grandma's study using her antique desk as a serving station. I tried to stay calm, to find some way to salvage the situation without creating a scene in front of 43 relatives. But when I saw that someone had moved Grandma's portrait from the mantel to make room for a buffet table, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just disrespectful to me, it was disrespectful to her memory and everything she had valued about preserving family legacy through careful stewardship rather than casual consumption. I quietly gathered my overnight bag and left without saying goodbye to anyone. I checked into a hotel in downtown Bellingham and spent the night staring at the ceiling trying to decide what to do next. The betrayal cut deep, but it was the casual entitlement that hurt most. They had taken over my home, excluded me from the planning, and then acted like I was the problem for not being grateful for their surprise. The next morning, I called my real estate attorney, Jennifer Walsh, who had handled Grandma's estate. I explained the situation and asked about my options for selling the property. Jennifer was surprised but supportive, explaining that as the sole owner, I had every right to sell whenever I chose. She recommended a high-end real estate agent who specialized in historic properties and could handle a quick but profitable sale. By noon, I had an appointment with Marcus Chen, a real estate agent who had been trying to get the listing for months. He arrived at the house while the cleanup crew my family had hired was still working, surveying the damage from the reunion. Marcus was professional enough not to comment on the state of the property, but I could see him taking notes about scuff marks on the hardwood floors and water stains on the antique furniture. The market for historic properties in Bellingham was incredibly strong, Marcus explained. Tech executives from Seattle were looking for weekend homes with character, and the Morrison Victorian was exactly what they wanted. He estimated we could get full asking price within a week if we priced it competitively and marketed it to the right buyers. I told him to proceed immediately. That afternoon, while my family was presumably recovering from their celebration, I signed the listing agreement. The house would go on the market Monday morning with an asking price of $2.1 million. Marcus assured me that with the right buyer, we could close within 2 weeks. I authorized him to accept the first full-price offer that came with proof of funds and a quick closing timeline. I didn't tell my family about the listing immediately. Part of me wanted to see how long it would take them to realize what I had done, and part of me needed time to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. I spent the weekend in Seattle, staying with my friend Sarah and trying to process the magnitude of the decision I had made. Selling Grandma's house felt like the ultimate betrayal of her trust, but keeping it felt like enabling my family's continued disrespect. The listing went live Monday morning with professional photos that Marcus had taken over the weekend. By Tuesday afternoon, we had 3 full-price offers, all from cash buyers who could close within 10 days. I accepted the offer from Dr. Patricia Williams, a retired surgeon who planned to use the house as a bed and breakfast, while preserving its historic character. She understood and appreciated what the property represented, which felt like honoring Grandma's legacy in a way my family never had. The call from my mother came Wednesday evening. "Madison, what is this nonsense about the house being for sale?" she demanded without any greeting. Emma saw the listing online and called me in a panic. "This has to be some kind of mistake." I explained calmly that there was no mistake, that I had decided to sell the property and had already accepted an offer. The silence on the other end was deafening, broken only by muffled conversation as she apparently covered the phone to speak with my father. "You cannot be serious," she finally said, her voice rising to a pitch I rarely heard. "This is our family home, your grandmother's house. You cannot just sell it because you're upset about one party." "It's not one party, Mom," I replied. "It's years of being treated like a caretaker rather than an owner, of having my boundaries ignored and my wishes dismissed. You planned an entire reunion in my house without even telling me, let alone asking my permission." Emma grabbed the phone at this point, her voice shaking with anger. "Madison, this is insane," she shouted. "You're destroying our family legacy over a misunderstanding. We can work this out. We can establish rules or schedules or whatever you need. But you cannot sell Grandma's house to strangers." "The house belongs to me, Emma," I said firmly. "Grandma left it to me specifically because she trusted me to make decisions about its future. This is my decision." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with both my parents and Emma alternating between anger, guilt-tripping, and desperate bargaining. They offered to pay me rent for future use of the house, to give me complete control over all family events, to formally apologize for the reunion incident. But their offers felt hollow, motivated by the loss of the property rather than any genuine understanding of why I was upset. Jake called separately the next day, his approach more emotional than confrontational. "Madison, I know you're hurt," he said, his voice soft and pleading. "But selling the house won't fix our family problems. It will just create new ones. Can't we find another way to work through this?" I appreciated his gentler approach, but I had already made my decision. The closing was scheduled for the following Monday, and Dr. Williams had already wired the earnest money. The final week before closing was emotionally brutal. Extended family members called to express their shock and disappointment, many of them having heard only my parents' version of events. Cousins who had barely spoken to me in years suddenly had strong opinions about my responsibility to preserve family heritage. Aunts and uncles who had enjoyed the reunion sent messages about how selfish I was being, how Grandma would be disappointed in my decision. I received dozens of text messages, emails, and voicemails, all variations on the same theme. I was destroying the family, I was dishonoring Grandma's memory, I was making a decision I would regret forever. The pressure was intense, but it also confirmed that I was making the right choice. These same people who were now lecturing me about family loyalty had been perfectly comfortable celebrating in my house without including me in the planning. The closing took place on a rainy Monday morning in Jennifer's office. Dr. Williams was gracious and respectful, asking thoughtful questions about the house's history and expressing genuine appreciation for its significance. She promised to preserve the historic character while making necessary updates, exactly what Grandma would have wanted. When I handed over the keys, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief that surprised me with its intensity. The check for $2.1 million felt surreal in my hands. After taxes and fees, I would net approximately $1.8 million, enough to buy a beautiful modern home in Seattle and invest the remainder for my future. But the money wasn't really the point. The sale was about establishing boundaries that my family had refused to respect and protecting my own emotional well-being from people who took my generosity for granted. My family's reaction to the completed sale was predictably dramatic. Emma called me sobbing, saying I had destroyed something irreplaceable and that she would never forgive me. My mother alternated between rage and grief, claiming I had torn apart the family over a simple misunderstanding. My father was more practical, asking if there was any way to reverse the sale or buy the house back from Dr. Williams. Jake was the only one who eventually came to understand my decision. He visited me in Seattle a month after the closing, and we had the most honest conversation we had ever had as siblings. "I finally get it," he said as we walked through my new neighborhood. "It wasn't really about the house, was it? It was about being seen and respected as a person, not just as a resource." "You're right," I admitted. The house was just the symbol of everything else. 6 months later, I received an invitation to Dr. Williams' first bed and breakfast guests. She had transformed the Victorian into a beautiful boutique inn, while preserving every historic detail that Grandma had cherished. The heritage roses were thriving. The original hardwood floors gleamed with professional care, and the antique furniture had been restored to its former glory. Seeing the house loved and appreciated by someone who understood its value was more healing than I had expected. My relationship with my family remains complicated. Emma and I barely speak, though Jake and I have grown closer through our shared understanding of family dynamics. My parents have grudgingly accepted my decision, though Grandma Victoria had left me the house because she trusted my judgment, and I used that judgment to protect both the property and my own self-respect. The $2.1 million surprise my family received wasn't just about a house changing hands. It was about the cost of taking someone for granted for too long, of assuming that family loyalty means accepting disrespect without consequences. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable toxic behavior, even when it comes from the people who are supposed to love you most. If you're listening to this and recognizing similar patterns in your own family relationships, know that you have the right to establish boundaries and enforce them. You don't owe anyone access to your resources, your property, or your emotional well-being just because you share DNA. Family should be about mutual respect and genuine care, not about one person constantly giving while others constantly take. The My Victorian house now serves guests from around the world, people who appreciate its history and beauty without taking it for granted. Dr. Williams sends me updates occasionally, sharing photos of the gardens in bloom or the dining room set for afternoon tea. The house has found its purpose as a place where people feel welcomed and valued, which is exactly what Grandma would have wanted. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve better treatment from their family. Remember, you have the power to choose who gets access to your generosity. And sometimes the most dramatic thing you can do is simply refuse to accept less than you deserve. The people who truly love you will respect your boundaries, and those who don't probably never loved you the way you deserved in the first place.